Number one is to identify your dominant emotion. Now, I've been doing some research trying to understand what is the underlying secrets of autistic behavior, and what I'm discovering is it's not that much different from neurotypical people, but it seems to be expressed differently. In other words, we have the same emotions as everybody does, just innate to humans. But I want to know what makes people who are autistic express those emotions a little bit differently. But to do that, number one is we need to identify which is the dominant emotion. Well, how many emotions are there? It kind of depends on who you ask. So I went online and I found that there are some 34,000 emotions. I don't want to go through all 34,000. We would be here forever. But some people say there are 6 core emotions. Other people talk about the temperaments, the 4 temperaments, but we're not going that direction. We're focusing on the core emotions, and those are, and as I read these, tell me or tell yourself which one is your dominant emotion. Are you ready? Here we go. Number 1 is anger. Number 2 is fear, and I would include self-consciousness into that. Number 3 is sadness. Number 4 is joy, or we could call that happiness. Number 5 is disgust, and number 6 is surprise. Now, as I look at these 6 emotion types, I don't know anybody who has a core emotion of surprise. I've never met anybody. Their whole life was all about surprise. I don't even know if that's possible. Disgust, I've known a few people, but not very many, who live their life with this cloud of disgust hanging over their head. Everything is disgusting, but we're talking, 1 out of 1,000 would be my guess. Now, joy, that seems to be the objective. That seems to be, happiness. That seems to be the core emotion that everybody should be targeting, should be moving toward. But it seems like some people, the way that they find joy is to be angry. So they want to be angry, and that is their core emotion. The other 2 are fear and sadness. Now, as I was going through this, I found that personally, as I go back through my entire life, and I'm 70 years old, it seems like the dominant emotions in my life have been fear and depression or sadness. Not so much anger. I'm really a difficult person to get angry. Well, we're not talking about me. We're talking about you. Which of these is your core emotion? Now, once we get that understood, and it could be a combination, but we're talking about the one that dominates more than any other, which is your normal mindset. Okay, once we have that, we can have a basis on which to go and ask ourselves this. Now that we understand what our core emotion is, do we want to move away from that direction? Okay, so number 1 is to identify your dominant emotion. So what is that? The second thing is we need to understand that one of the things that people who are autistic grapple with, probably more so than anybody that I can imagine, is being misunderstood. So it's not just that we feel misunderstood, which I think we do, at least I have my entire life, but I actually was misunderstood. People didn't know where I was coming from. They didn't understand why I was so quiet. Well, it was because I was very self-conscious. I was fearful. I was out of place. And there was something going on neurologically inside of me that I didn't understand. And to be honest with you, I still don't understand it, but I've overcome it by and large. But there was this thing where I was just not a part of anything. And the way that I like to describe it, and I've seen other people or heard other people use the same description, it's kind of like you're watching a movie, watching a show on television. We live our life like that, at least I do. You're not a participant, you're not a part of it, you're just observing. That can get you in trouble when you are looking at other people and you're just watching the show around you. People don't like to be watched. They don't like to be stared at. Go into a restaurant, grocery store, church, wherever you happen to be. If you stare at somebody, you're just watching the show. They don't like that. Particularly women, they get the wrong idea, and men, they find it intimidating. So you might get slapped in the face by a woman and punched in the nose by a man. But the point of all that is we're often misunderstood. They don't understand particularly our meltdowns. They think that is anger. They don't understand our stimming. We're not going to talk about that a lot in detail, but stimming is one of those things where we just have this repetitive behavior, and it's just absorbing and burning up energy. I'm not sure that there is anybody who doesn't do a little bit of that, even neurotypical people, but I've also seen people who do it very obviously. They just can't stop it, or maybe they don't even want to stop it. They may not even be conscious of it. But I do catch myself now and again rocking back and forth, and what I do, sometimes I stop myself, and sometimes, I don't care. I feel like rocking back and forth. But yeah, I think everybody does stimming, and if they didn't, we wouldn't have rocking chairs. Just my opinion. So the second thing we need to come to grips with is the reality that not only do we have a dominant motion that needs to be identified so we can temper it if we need to, but also we need to grasp the coarse reality that we always have been and always will be misunderstood. Now, I've come to terms with that. I've come to a place in my life and have a long time ago. I'm 70 years old, but a long time ago, I came to terms with the fact that I was autistic, or that I was different. This is before I even knew I was autistic. And I was okay with it. Now, when I was a kid, I wasn't okay with it because I felt rejected. I felt out of place. I didn't like being rejected, and being misunderstood was a real problem then because nobody, or very few, I should say, people wanted to have anything to do with you. And you like to belong. I mean, it's human nature. We like to belong. So we're misunderstood. Number 3 is this. We need to understand, in my opinion, that our mind is formed in part in childhood. This is controversial, and I think I can take a few moments and just wipe away the controversy. When I say that our mind is formed in childhood, we need to understand that from everything that I've read, everything that I've studied, everything that I have experienced, autism is congenital. That means it was here when we were born, so it was consequently prenatal. There is something that occurs in our prenatal state that precipitates us being autistic. So is it set in stone? Yeah, it's set in stone. So what is this thing about nurture versus nature? If it's set in stone, it's natural. So there is no nurture? No. Of course there's nurture. Of course there is something we can do. Remember, we were talking about our dominant emotion. There is something we can do to temper that, to alter that. My opinion, again, this is all just my hypothesis, but I hope you're following along with me as I talk about it. Now, I've used this illustration sometime in the past, probably more than once, but when I was a first grader, we would have art class at our school, and they'd do all kinds of weird things. They'd give us finger paint. Why in the world would anybody in the right mind give first graders, a whole bunch of them, 30 of us, all finger paint? I have no idea, but we got real creative, and somehow, some way, all of our pictures looked kind of alike. Looked like what people used to call modern art, Picasso, when he had a bad day. But another thing they would do, and this is what I want to talk about, is they would give us a lump of clay that looked like a stick of butter, same shape. But it was gray in color, kind of a gray-green color. And we'd unwrap it, take the cellophane off of it, and we'd make whatever we wanted. So we would take that clay and we would form, I like to make elephants. And then when I realized I could not make an elephant, I decided I would make an ashtray because, it's kind of easy to make an ashtray, but coming from that fundamentalist Baptist environment, we didn't use tobacco in our home, didn't know too many people who did. Why do we need an ashtray? All right, so I'd form it into a ball, and there it's a paperweight. Take that home, give it to my parents. Here, it's a paperweight. Actually, it was just a ball of clay. All right, so you look at this ball of clay, and you say, what is that? Some people would say it's a paperweight. Some people would say it's clay. The question is, which one is right? And the answer is they're both right. In its natural form, it is clay. It always has been clay. It always will be clay. It will just be clay. But it's also a paperweight. That's what it was formed to do. So clay is nature and the paperweight is nurture. So we have both. We have, well, nurture is what you make out of nature, but nature is always there. So what is it? Is it a tree or is it an oak? It's both. Now, you didn't make it an oak. Both of those are nature. But the point is, you can be two things at one time. Why is that so hard for people to come to terms with? So we want to understand that our mind is formed largely in childhood, but it's kind of like life circumstances. Took what we had prenatally, congenitally, and it kind of formed it into what we are now and what we have been along the way. But we've always been clay. I mean, we've always been that base thing. We've always been that fundamental thing. We have always been autistic. And so, yeah, you can take autism and you can manipulate it. You can turn it into things, but it's still autism. Bottom line, and we need to come to terms with that because it helps us identify who we are. Helps us realize that, hey, we're okay exactly the way that nature made us. Or if you are religious, you say God made you, whatever. Number 4, we want to come to terms with one of the things that I think most people with autism have a problem with, have difficulty with. Now, I don't think you can be born with low self-esteem. You may have an inclination for low self-esteem, but I don't think you're necessarily born with it. I think that's something that probably you were taught, talking about nature versus nurture. Why is that? Well, it's because we are out of place. We are misplaced. You go to school and the first thing you learn is not your ABCs, but you learn you're different. You can't help to miss it, and it becomes very difficult. So you are over there from their perspective, and you should be over here. Where is over here? Well, that's the neurotypical hive mind. That's where everybody lives and works together except for us. We have our own little world, and people don't understand that, and they see there's something wrong with us because we're not a part of their hive mind. So what do? Well, we withdraw. We think there's something wrong with us because we're not a part of that. That doesn't make any sense, but that is the way the human mind works, so we now have low self-esteem. We sometimes stoop into deep, dark depression. Well, at least I did, and a lot of people with autism that I encounter have had that same experience. And we try to fix it the wrong way. You know, I know a lot of people, not just autism, but when they have challenges in their life, they try to make it feel better by using or abusing something like temporary fixes like food or alcohol or tobacco or narcotics. You know, they use something that makes them feel good for a moment. And it gives them joy for a moment, makes them feel good. But as soon as they're done with whatever that thing is, it stops. Yeah, okay, so the cigarette makes me feel good. Then you stop smoking and you stop feeling good. So what do? Pick up another one. So that drink of alcohol makes you feel good, but you stop drinking and the buzz wears off. So what do? Well, you want to feel good, and so you want to take all these feel goods, all these bits of happiness, and you want to string them together, and so you make this chain of events: drinking, smoking, overeating, or just eating bad food that's not good for you, or whatever you're doing. And that chain of bad behaviors becomes joy. No, it doesn't. It's just a string of bad behaviors. It's a string of temporary fixes. It's a string of, it's a chain of happinesses, to put it in that term. It's not joy. So if we want to find joy, what I've discovered is you got to get rid of those things that give you temporary happiness. Actually take away your joy, and if you could get into a place where you have joy, you know, that's one of the emotions that we mentioned earlier, one of the 6 emotions, you can't have joy, or at least I couldn't. I couldn't have joy and be 100 pounds overweight. I'd be happy when I was eating, but as soon as I stopped eating, the joy left, or the happiness left. There never was that joy. So we need to come to grips, number 4, with low self-esteem, and we need to ask ourselves the question, what is it that gave us low self-esteem? And I believe, at least in my case, so I'm assuming in many cases, if not most cases, maybe all cases, we acquired low self-esteem through rejection. Those neurotypical people who live in the hive mind, who do not understand us and just think we're odd because nature has taught them, I think they are bred to respond that way. We've talked about this in other videos, and it's a protective measure. So they avoid people who act rather kind of weird from their perspective. Because when you act weird, you act odd, you could be diseased. Okay, so give it a few thousand years, and the people who avoided odd people not only avoided neurotypical people, but they avoided people who were diseased, and so they were the ones who were likely to survive and pass on their genes. And so that propensity to avoid people who act oddly, behave oddly from their perspective, are more likely to survive. And they're more likely to have that inclination to avoid us, and that's what they do. I mean, they can't help it. That's the way that nature has bred them to be. So we have low self-esteem. Number 5 is this: cognitive, rational decisions. This is one of the positive things of being autistic, in my opinion, is we tend to think logically, tend to think cognitively, tend to think with our brains and not with our emotions, but the emotions are still there and dragging and pushing against. Whichever term you want to use, dragging away or pushing against common sense, just rationality. So emotions, we say, are powerful drivers that can run us off course. But we've got to learn to be tempered by cognition. And the best way to do that, or the most effective way, I should say, to do that, maybe not the best way, but the most effective way to do that, is to get as far away from the hive mind as you possibly can. Get as far away from neurotypical people as you possibly can. And that, I think, is why so many people who are autistic are loners. Because we've got to get away so we can think and behave rationally with our brains. Get around the hive mind, get around neurotypical people and those emotions, whatever they are. You know, remember we talked about that at the very onset. What is your core emotion? Anger, fear, sadness, joy, disgust, or surprise. What is your core emotion? It comes out when you get around the hive mind, when you get around neurotypical people. And you take these little kids who are autistic and you put them in the middle of an environment where everybody is neurotypical. And what's going to emerge are those emotions, for good or for bad. Anger, fear, sadness. But I don't know that joy has ever emerged, or maybe disgust, surprise. It seems like every day is a surprise until you get used to it. So we say that number 5 is we need to focus on cognitive decisions if we're going to survive in a neurotypical world. Because emotions are powerful drivers. And I don't think we have to escape and get away from the hive mind. I don't think we have to totally ignore neurotypical people. I think we just need to be aware that we're different, and they have a different language, and they have a different understanding, and they don't see us in a real light. They have these gray-colored glasses that they view the world in, and they are bred again by thousands of years of trial and error, and the way they came out is the way they came out, like bees in a beehive. That's just the way they are. And once we realize that's the way they are, and this is the way we are, it's not a matter of right or wrong, good or bad. But you ever been stung by a bee? It hurts. And sometimes neurotypical people, if you disturb their normalcy, you get stung. They'll let you have it. They will ridicule you. They will push you away. They will do all kinds of things to hurt you, and until you understand how to work with that and realize that that is their nature, and you're not going to teach bees not to sting. And you can stay away from them, and that will solve a problem. But, if you learn to work with them, they're still going to sting you. But if you learn to work with them and learn the behavior patterns, then you have enough sense not to go into the hive mind, go into, I don't know if you've ever been out in the country and see the no shit, I wonder what's in there. I'll tell you what's in there. A wasp nest, so don't open the door. Maybe in the winter you can get away with that. But, it's not that we stay away from the hive mind or stay away from neurotypical people as much as it is we understand that their behavior is innate and we cannot change them. And all the should statements in the world is not going to change them. And so we make cognitive, rational decisions unencumbered and uninfluenced, if at all possible, by neurotypical people. Yeah, we can learn from them, we can work with them, but by and large, we're different. We have to accept that. Number 6 is, I want to focus on this one, and that is fear. Every human being has a certain amount of fight or flight. Fear of rejection. Fear of being outside of the hive mind. In my life, and again, this is me talking, this is based on my experience, learning to live outside the hive mind and learning that it's okay. They don't have to accept me. Why would I even want them to? If they're not happy with me, if they're discontented by me getting too close to their nest or whatever you want to call it, I stay away and I work with them as much as I can. I just want to learn their behavior so I know when I can and cannot get too close. They're not bad people. They're just pre-programmed by nature to be the way they are, and that's my opinion. So we have this fear because we're never going to live in the hive mind, or not successfully. Well, I shouldn't say never, but it's highly unlikely. So we have this fear then of being left alone. Nobody likes to be alone. And what I've had to learn in my life, and I'm not giving you advice, I'm just telling you what I've learned in my life, is I have learned that being alone is necessary for survival. That goes against everything I've ever read, everything I've ever learned from psychology. To be mentally healthy, we need to have connections with other people. But what if those connections get you stung over and over and over and over and over again? That's not healthy. So sometimes the healthiest thing to do is to get away and just discover where it is that you can best function in life. And what I found is I don't have to be totally alone. I just have to be conscious and aware, very cognitive, of the behavior patterns of myself and of neurotypical people. Learn their language, learn their behavior, learn to function with it. That for me seems to work and seems to work very well. Number 7 is sometimes we have skewed judgment. I'd like to say that autistic people we're just perfect, but people don't understand us. That's not the case. The fact of the matter is we have problems like everybody has problems. And this, I think, is a universal problem that affects every human being, but let's talk about it from the perspective of autism. And that is, we have biases. We have confirmation biases. That is to say that we have a belief, and then we interpret everything to fit our belief, to confirm our belief. We also have what psychologists call anchor biases. And by that I mean, the first thing you hear, that's what you believe. And it's really tough. And I think every human experiences this, but it's very tough to shake loose from that anchor bias. Now, I know over the years I've had opinions, and I've changed my mind about a lot of things. But those initial biases those anchor biases stayed with me sometimes for years and years and years. That's why it's important to teach your children right, because that's an anchor bias. Teach your child in the way he should go. And when he is old, that anchor bias is going to stay with him. But we still can change. When reality smacks us in the face, sometimes we have to say, that hurts. That is reality. So we need to be aware of the fact that sometimes our judgment as people who are autistic is affected by our biases. And one of those biases that affects our judgment is what we talked about earlier, the rejection of people in the hive mind. Rejection of neurotypical people. I don't know about you, but I don't like to be rejected. I don't think anybody does, because this is not our nature. That's not the way nature put us together. We need that group for all kinds of reasons, for protection, for survival, for sustenance. We need the group, but we're outside the group. And being outside the group makes us do weird and odd things to be accepted by the group, or in reaction to being rejected by the group. What's worked for me is to accept the fact I'm not in the hive mind. I don't belong there. I'm going to get stung. I'm not going to function well there. So why would I want to go there? Well, nature tells me you need to belong. But keep in mind that we are a cognitive people. At least that's been my experience. It's what I have learned when I study. People who are autistic tend to be rational people, more so than emotional people. The emotion is in the hive mind. That's where they're climbing over top of each other, trying to become the alpha whatever. That's not us. We're not in that emotional hive mind, that neurotypical hive mind. We're in a different place. And that place is where we use logic and reason. We are the Leonard Nimoy, I can't remember his character's name, of humanity. We think. Therefore, I am autistic. Or we could say, I am autistic. Therefore, I think. I don't react with emotion. But if we get too close to the hive mind, that's exactly what we do. In fact, we become over-emotional because of stimulus. Remember, people with autism typically don't do well against overstimulation, which is normal stimulation in the hive mind. So we get too close to the hive mind. We are sucked in and we are overstimulated by the weird behavior. Yeah, they're the ones who are behaving weird, in my opinion, not us. The weird behavior, and what happens is I start making these stupid decisions. Got to get away from it. Stay in touch, learn their language, learn to work with it. Don't isolate myself, that is my opinion, but also accept myself as I am. And, hey, I'm okay with it. And I hope you don't wait till you're 70 years old to figure that out. I think I figured it out probably in my 40s or 50s, whatever. Number 8 is denial. This is another form of avoidance, and denial is sometimes when we're just being dismissive. We're not going to accept the truth. We're not going to accept the way we are, and if we do accept the way we are, we're not going to accept the fact that it's okay to be who we are. Is it written in stone somewhere that there's something wrong about being autistic? If it is, I'd like to see the stone so I could smash it with a sledgehammer. There is nothing wrong with being autistic. Are we different? Yeah. Well, so what? They're different. They're different from us. We're different from them. The only real difference that makes a difference is there happens to be more of them. I mean, a lot more of them. And that's okay, too, because we have our role in our culture, in our society. They, neurotypical people, have their role, their part. And as we look at this from an us versus them, we need to understand that, we can actually function harmoniously. Symphonically is another way to say it, or centristically. I don't even know if that's a word, but yeah, we can work together. We don't have to be alike. You know? If everybody was identical, imagine what the world would be like if we were all identical twins. We all had the same talents, same attributes. We're all basically the same. We wouldn't get much done, would we? In fact, I don't think we would survive as a species. So think of yourself as essential for human survival. And to do that, we need to contend with denial, that form of avoidance, of trying to be dismissive about the truth, the coarse reality of being autistic. Quit telling ourselves, at least this is what I'm thinking, quit telling yourself that being different is a bad thing. I mean, because that's what we've been taught our entire life. Taught not maybe in a classroom or maybe in a classroom, I don't know, but because that's what we have been taught through experience. Does that make it true? I don't think so. Folks, I got to tell you, I'm perfectly content being autistic, being alone, and that's number 9. Let's talk about being alone for a second. And to do that, we need to go all the way back up to number 1. Number 1 of these 9 points, and that is, which of these is you? Now, I can think of some other people. My mom was probably the best mother who ever lived, but she did have a temper. It was kind of like when she got up in the morning and after she went to sleep at night. She was temperamental. But she wasn't dangerous. She didn't really hurt anybody. She just a little bit mad all the time, and my dad just the opposite. It was hard to get a rise out of him. I mean, you just couldn't. Seemed like it was really difficult to make him mad. Believe me, you could make him mad. And he let me know it a few times. But the point is, we have these emotions. So which one is it? Is it anger? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it joy? Is it disgust? Is it surprise? Is it a combination of these things? And I think all of them are essential. But which one, if you had to choose, if you could just get a blank slate and write down your ideal core emotion, not that you're not going to have these others, but this one is going to be your center. So you're going to be a centered person based on, well, I would choose joy. Or I think a better word would be contentment. And that brings us back to number 9. So what is it that we're trying to do with this presentation, with this video? Is we're trying to learn, at least in my opinion, in my 70 years, how to be content. How to be content with who I am. Not just with autism, but with everything. I hope you're paying attention, because this is important. It occurs to me that I am not the most intelligent person on the planet. I'm okay with that. It occurs to me that I am not the most athletic person. I'm content not being the strongest, bodybuilder. I'm not, I try to work out with weights, but man, I'm not good at that. I'm not an athlete. Do I have to be? Do I need to be? I don't think so. Can I be content without being athletic? Yeah, I can be. I found that out. Could I be content without being a millionaire or multimillionaire or billionaire? Can I be content with just getting by or sometimes not even getting by, but can I still be content? Yeah, if I want to be, I don't have to be hostile. I don't have to be angry. I don't have to be resentful. I don't have to be fighting all the time. And believe me, those emotions are still there. But they don't have to be the dominant fundamental emotion in my life. So the reason that we said everything that we said, the reason we went through all this presentation is try to bring us to focus as people who have autism to a point where we can be content. And I got to emphasize this, got to say it again. That doesn't mean that we are getting rid of all these other emotions, these other 6 emotions or 34,000, whichever you want to look at. Those are part of the human experience. They're there on purpose, but they don't have to dominate, control our lives. So if we're going to pick one, why not pick joy? Why not pick contentment? Why not work toward that? Because keep in mind, You are that stick of butter bit of clay, and it's in your hand, and now it's always going to be clay. You're always going to have those fundamental basic attributes. But you do have a lot of wiggle room. I mean a lot of wiggle room. And you can make yourself not to be anything you want to be, but you can make some significant changes. And I think one of those changes, sometimes you might need some help doing this, is if you can't live a life of contentment and joy, you can improve and move at least in that direction. If you got something out of this video, would you subscribe to our YouTube channel? Give this video a thumbs up. That helps. Leave a comment, start a conversation, or join a conversation with somebody who's already left a comment, and share this on social media. That will help us a lot, and hopefully that will help some other people. We will see you all next time.